Hey everyone, Mulligan here, and welcome to the Elysian portion of my legendary crafting guide. As always, if you're new to the game or just getting into constructed, you're probably wondering what legendaries you need to craft first. This series is aimed towards answering that question for you. Because of that, we'll be focusing on a single two-color faction for each video. I want to be as informative as possible with the cards I talk about, since I feel that going fairly in depth and giving a little history on how they've been used in different metagames will help you guys just starting out that want to focus on crafting legendaries for a particular deck. For this video, I'll mainly be focusing on well-established decks, and within each archetype, I'll be talking about the essential legendaries, which you should always craft first, and then the optional legendaries, which are cards that occasionally find their way into some decks, but are usually metagame dependent. Any legendary I don't mention is either highly experimental, doesn't fit the general game plan of the popular decks you would see, or is just plain bad. Let's get into it. The list of legendaries to consider for Elysian is pretty short, and like Rakano, most of the Elysian legendaries are pretty polarizing and will only fit into specific decks. However, there is one I have to mention first before the others that has been in every Elysian focused deck up to this point, and that is Sandstorm Titan. The 4-power 5/6 unit requiring 2-time influence to play. He's got endurance, and while he's in play, units can't fly. The best 4-drop in the game, showing up as a key legendary once again. You guys will start to see a pattern with him. Like I said in the Combrei guide, this always seems to be the first legendary that new players hear about, and also the first one they see complaints about. 5/6 4-drop with pure upside is crazy, and why some think it's OP. Sandstorm Titan is just as essential for Elysian as it is for Combrei. As I said, every single Elysian deck that was ever viable in the history of Eternal has played Sandstorm Titan. Before you craft anything else I mention on this list, craft 4 of these. They are a must for Elysian decks, and every other mid-range deck running Time, unless you're trying to make a Time Justice Primal Chalice deck, which is a control deck. Anything less than 4 copies is just handicapping yourself. But let's move into the specific archetypes, and I first want to touch on Elysian midrange. And we'll start off with the essential legendaries, of which there is only one, that being Cerso the Great Glutton. A 5-power 6/6 unit requiring 2 time and 2 primal influence to play. He's got Overwhelm. When a unit blocks or is blocked by Cerso, transform that unit into a 2/2 pig. I get asked from time to time whether Cerso is worth crafting for Elysian midrange, and my answer is always an absolute yes, without question. Myself, and I'm sure many other players will agree, that if you can't craft Cerso, then it's best not to bother playing Elysian midrange. There are budget options that also cost 5 power, but the deck is so much worse without Cerso. After Sandstorm Titan, crafting 4 of these should be top priority if you're building Elysian midrange. There is one exception. If you're trying to do a 3-faction build, like Time Justice Primal midrange, then you might be able to get away with 3 copies of these. I would personally just make 4 anyway. So moving on to the optional legendaries for Elysian midrange, of which there is also only one, that being Mystic Ascendant, the 6-power 4/4 unit requiring 1 time influence to play. When Empower is activated, he gains +2/+2 and you draw a card. This has been in and out of Elysian midrange decks for as long as I can remember. I personally never found success with Mystic Ascendant in Elysian midrange, and I am of the opinion that they don't fit the game plan of the deck. However, other people have found success that were able to reach higher ranks than myself, and the card has even made its way into lists for big tournaments like the ETS Invitational. So I'm not going to dismiss Mystic Ascendant as an option for the deck. Typically when it is run, unless you're trying to go big with a really high power curve, 2 copies seems to be the magic number. It won't hurt to craft more than 2 though, since the card is just generally good in quite a few decks. Moving on to the essential legendaries for Clockroach decks. and this is going to include the traditional Clockroach deck and Dark Roaches, which is basically a Clockroach deck but runs Shadow as a third color in addition to Time and Primal. But there is only one essential legendary for this deck, and it is Crown of Possibilities. A 3-power relic requiring 1 time and 1 primal influence to play. While this is in play, units you draw gain a random skill. So, fair warning, Clockroach decks have historically not been good at all in almost any metagame. Their only shining moment was brief when Chalice was first reintroduced into the meta. However, I feel it's pretty well established at this point, and that if you're going to build the deck, you will need 4 copies of these. The Clockroach engine relies on having this card in play. Otherwise, this is generally not essential at all, and I'd steer clear of them until you craft other cards that you need. There are no optional legendaries for the Clockroach deck, so let's move over to Shimmerpack decks. And this is going to include the traditional Shimmerpack decks, Shimmering Combrei, and the Fire Time Primal variants. And as far as essential legendaries, there's only one. If you might have guessed, it is Shimmerpack. 8-power 4/4 unit requiring 2 time and 2 primal influence to play. When he comes into play, you transform any number of units into copies of Shimmerpack. I'll go ahead and mention really quick that Seraph, Night Chancellor Seraph, is also an essential legendary to craft as well for Shimmering Combrei, if you're going for that. But with that out of the way, Shimmerpack decks have been out of the metagame for quite some time, but their game plan is very straightforward. This is the marquee card for the archetype, since this card and Xenon Obelisk allow you to play units that help ramp you to 8 power, but are normally pretty bad on their own. You just can't really play Shimmerpack decks without Shimmerpack. Though this card is essential, it does cost 8 at the end of the day, and typical lists never run more than 2 copies. So that's the maximum I would craft if you really want to play the deck. Crafting 3 is a consideration if you're brave enough to take this to a tournament. Otherwise, like Crown of Possibilities, you likely don't need this card for any other deck, and I'd stay away from them until you have every other legendary you need. That's it for the Elysian portion of the legendary crafting guide. If you're just starting out, let me know if these videos have been helpful to you. Hopefully I've pointed you guys in the right direction. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. If you have any suggestions or just general feedback, let me know in the comments section below. Also consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the future videos, not just for this series, but for the other Eternal content I put out as well. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.